Partner, what do you have for us on DeAndre Hopkins and his perceived fit in Baltimore as it compares to his time last year in Kansas City?
Yeah, so Jeffrey Chadiha, who's a national NFL Network columnist, he recently came out with a column that had one burning question for each team, and so he went on the Glenn Clark show. And here's important background: Jeff originated from Kansas City, so that's like when one of the guys here in Baltimore that cover Baltimore intimately and then go up to the nationals, there's the national networks, they're still very in tune and very plugged in with the local scene. That's what Jeffrey is with KC. So obviously Glenn Clark, having him on, they wanted to talk a little bit about DeAndre Hopkins and how he might fit here in Baltimore. And Glenn was arguing the same thing we have, which is that, yes, the Ravens have a history of bringing guys who, especially wide receivers that are 32, 33 plus, but in the past they would bring him here as a wide receiver 1. And this year they're bringing DeAndre in as a wide receiver 3, potentially more depending on injuries. And so Jeffrey was talking about how he feels like he is a better fit in Baltimore than he was in KC. Take a listen.
And as much as Odell Beckham maybe didn't live up to being paid $15 million, he was helpful in Baltimore. He made big catches every game that season. I feel like DeAndre Hopkins can be that guy still.
Yeah, DeAndre Hopkins was miscast in Kansas City, and I think people who were really being honest with themselves when he showed up here understood that. You look at Patrick Mahomes and his willingness to throw contested catches throughout his career. He has never been that kind of quarterback, and DeAndre Hopkins is exactly that kind of receiver. He's not a fast guy. He's going to try to bully people and use those great hands. And so I wasn't surprised that it went downhill, but I do think in Baltimore, it's probably a better fit for him because you have to, one, you have to assume that Lamar Jackson's improvisation is going to be a bigger factor in him having opportunities to get open. Derrick Henry's presence, Zay Flowers' presence, those tight ends, all those guys are going to make it easier on him to be able to operate and do certain things. And you're right, he's not going to be a number 1, but I think for his skill set and his savvy, his experience, I think there is a lot more reasons to be excited about him in that offense. Again, not being a 70-catch guy, but being a guy who can do what Odell Beckham Jr. did when he was there a couple of years ago.
Okay, so Bobby, he said that DeAndre was miscast in KC, and he feels like Lamar's improvisation will be good for DeAndre because DeAndre's not like a speed guy, more of like a jump ball guy. And so Lamar also isn't like this big timing thrower, right? Like he's done more of it, but it's one reason why he and Rashad Bateman continue to work on their chemistry because Rashad is that kind of guy. So agree with him that he won't be a 70-yard catch. Then he ends it by saying he can be like OBJ 2 years ago. Do you see that as a good thing? Do you feel like he's a better fit in Baltimore? What's your thoughts on Jeffrey here?
Let's go to OBJ's stats in 2023, just as a refresher for all of us, since we've been doing a lot of projections this week and over the last 2 weeks with where Likely is going to be and where Andrew's going to be and where all these pieces of the puzzle will be productivity-wise. So Odell, remember, he was injured to start the season, wasn't available to start. So he played in 14 games, 6 of which were starts, and he finished with 565 yards on 35 receptions. If we take the usage away for a second, and we're just saying, okay, statistically, DeAndre ends up putting up similar numbers to what Odell did in 23, to me, that's a success. That's a good fit. And I think you'd agree with that.
Well, what's funny is that I guess, and I'm sure they weren't looking up the numbers when they were having this conversation, but DeAndre Hopkins had more yardage and more touchdowns than Odell Beckham Jr. had in 2023. And to your point, maybe that's because he wasn't healthy the whole time. He played in 14 games. So it would actually, if he put up OBJ numbers, they're actually a little bit less than what DeAndre put up last year. But if we're not taking this as like a literal, well, he'll have more yards and touchdowns, but a better fit, I don't think that saying he's a better fit means that he's going to have more yards than he did in KC. It more is like it's a better fit that he's wide receiver 3. And by the way, Odell Beckham Jr. was wide receiver 2. Let's remember that. Bateman, remember, was the one that because of his injuries and because OBJ was there, I remember Todd Monken saying like he was like a new coordinator at the time, right? And so he didn't know what he could get out of Bateman given the injuries, and he already knew OBJ. So Bateman was really wide receiver 3 that year. So OBJ's putting up these type of numbers as wide receiver 2. If Hopkins puts up those types of numbers as wide receiver 3, that would be phenomenal.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be phenomenal because you still know that Bateman and Flowers are going, because if he's wide receiver 3 doing that, then it means the top 2 receivers are still healthy.
Yeah. And if to Jeff's point, right, that savvy and that service time experience and everything that he's been through can come out in different snippets of those 500 plus projected receiving yards, right? Those moments where you got to have it. We've talked about those 3rd and 4 situations, those got to have it chain moving situations where you're trying to close out a game or get back into a game, or a 50-50 ball in the corner of the end zone, right? That type of contested catch presence that he will bring to you, like then that's the gravy on top of what he's bringing, because you already have so many weapons that are around him, but maybe, just maybe, he'll bring a new element that'll add to the explosiveness of what this offense already is.
Yeah. And again, I'm just not expecting a ton unless somebody gets injured. I just want 3rd down. I want you to move the sticks and be another threat in the red zone, be somebody that Lamar can go to in big moments, because it's like, all right, I'm throwing the ball up, Hopkins, go and get it. That's really that's what I feel like he's cast here to do. And then to be more if there's an injury. Now, Bobby, before we move, they had another conversation about Derrick Henry, which you teased based off of Heather's super chat. I do have a follow-up question for habitual line stepper. I think Dre Dog was another one. I think there's one other person. While we're talking about Henry, can you give me the 3 players that I deemed a hit during that last section with Jeff Zrebeck that I deemed a hit that you disagree with? Just the top 3, not all of them. The top 3 that you think I was dead wrong. I deemed it a hit, and you're like, no, that's not a hit. All right? I'm very curious what that is, because I wasn't looking at the chat while we were talking until after. Okay, meanwhile, Bobby, we know that both Derrick Henry and Eric DeCosta have been very upfront. They want him to finish his career in Baltimore. Derrick Henry said that at NFL Honors. He said this is where he wants to finish out his career. Eric DeCosta said, do you agree? Or Derek DeCosta was asked later, do you agree? And he said, well, I've got his picture being framed in my office as we speak. So what does that tell you? Okay. So both of them are on board for an extension. Now, we don't know the timing of this. You'd want to get it done before the end of the season. But knowing that they both want it, sometimes you're like, why hasn't it happened yet? So Glenn and Jeffrey talked about, Saquon Barkley, and was there anything with his new deal that maybe could have impacted things in Baltimore? Take a listen.
The ante for the Ravens, because you look at the contract that Derrick Henry signed, that 2-year, $16 million deal, and at the time it made sense because of where he was at in his career and the market for his services, but clearly he outperformed it. But the question you have is, Derrick Henry's going to be 31, and it's 3 years older than Saquon, and even though they both put up great numbers, how much more can you expect from Derrick Henry, and what's a fair market deal? It is tricky because you're not going to give him like a 3-year contract or something like that at this stage, but I imagine that both sides want to find a way to make his compensation better. There are ways to do it. I mean, whether that's trying to come up with some kind of a 2-year extension, whether it's really a 1-year deal with some way to get him a little more money in this year. But yeah, to be on a contract that pays him $8 million a year on average after the year he had doesn't seem like a great deal for him.
I agree with that. Although again, I don't think it's $20 million either, right? Like I think if you're Derrick Henry's camp, that's you ask for that, but I do think that you understand that Saquon Barkley, for as much as we talk about how it was a good year for running backs, I still think we recognize how unique Saquon Barkley is as like the centerpiece of an offense. And while Derrick Henry is great, Lamar Jackson is the centerpiece of the offense. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Jalen Hurts, who had a phenomenal year, but I think we saw how dramatically different it was. And as good as Derrick Henry was, it was still about the same totality-wise for the Ravens with Derrick Henry as it was the year before with Gus Edwards and J.K.
All right, so kind of agree with Glenn Clark there. I mean, he obviously deserves a raise. Now, nobody knows if the Saquon Barkley deal is really holding things up. We don't know that. I mean, it may just be they don't feel like they need to get to it until later. Maybe they're just waiting for Derek to be back in town, maybe during OTAs or minicamp or whatever, and that might be a good time to do it. So it may not be because of Saquon, but I agree with Glenn there that it's like, hey, he's phenomenal. The king. He's the king, future Hall of Famer. But $20 million, he's not. He's a little bit older. And the Ravens seem to find success in the running game, as he pointed out, regardless of who the running back is. That doesn't mean that Derek didn't carry a couple games last year, because he for sure did. And he's a difference maker. So the question is, Bobby, they both agreed he's not getting to $20 million per year, which is where Saquon was, but $8 million per year. Holy crap. We still can't believe the NFL let that happen, that he and Lamar could team up and all Derek would get was $8 million per year. What's the right number?
Double what he has right now.
You'd put him at 16?
I mean, he's got a
$16 million per year?
He's worth it. I don't know if they'll do it, but
I put him at 12.
He's worth it. I mean,
look at this right in here.
You got to keep this guy happy.
Josh Jacobs right here, 12 million. Alvin Kamara, just over 12 million. And he is getting older. At some point, he's going to hit a cliff. I'd put him in that 12 million category. I can't do 16.
I get it, but he's showing no signs, Sarah. He's showing no signs. And you want him. I mean, you want to keep him happy. And Kamara, just to me, and that the problem is, if I'm him,
maybe 12 million will make him happy. You don't know.
Well, I'm looking at my peers. Okay. All right. How about this? If it's 12 and I'm Derek, I'm looking at my peers in that 12 category, and I'm saying to myself, Alvin Kamara at this point in his career. Now, somebody might argue, well, Derek, you're not a young man anymore. and that would be true in NFL years, but he hasn't shown it statistically. Josh Jacobs is a bruiser, great running back. You're taking Derrick Henry every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So to me, it's like I see him up in that Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey range.
Well, hold on a second. That range there's a huge gap in that range.
There is. I'm saying in the middle.
And Jonathan, you said in that range. You said their range. Okay, but now you're saying middle.
Well, in the range of between those two.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I think he'd be deserving.
Okay, I hear you in terms of pure stats. I'm just looking up ages. Alvin Kamara is 29. Jonathan Taylor is 26. Right? Yeah, 26. These are light years difference in ages. Josh Jacobs. Let's look at him real quick.
Oh, they're both young dudes. I mean, these
27. I mean, so there's. I understand there have been no signs. I agree. I think last year, Derrick Henry was phenomenal. I think he was able to carry things at times where Lamar could stay healthy and not have to be Superman week in and week out. So I have plenty of value, but I'm telling you how front offices and GMs and how all of them think, and they're going to be looking at that age. And if it were just stats, Bobby, then he could get the 20 million because he had over 2,000 yards like Saquon did. If it was just purely stats, but that's not what it is. That's not how this works. right? The same thing, we talk about this all the time. The best quarterback isn't necessarily the highest paid quarterback. It's the most recent, right? So when you're talking about stats, that's certainly one huge part of it, but it's not the only part of it. It's not exactly how it works. And so, like it or not, age does matter, and especially at the running back position. And so far, Derrick Henry has defied it 1,000%. But if we're only stats, then you should be saying, okay, you should get the 20 million like Saquon, right? But you're even saying, okay, wait, age comes into it. When is he going to fall off? All that kind of stuff. And so to me, I stick with around the 12 million. If you wanted to put him above Alvin, like you said, between Jonathan and Christian, I'd say between Alvin and Jonathan. So maybe in that 13 million.
Jonathan. Yeah. So we're talking about, I mean, we're somewhere in the ballpark of like a $3 to $5 million difference in terms of,
which is a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're the Ravens.
You have a 19 million as your top. That's where I kind of like my eyebrows, my ears perked up. I was like, I don't know about 19 million. He's close to the Saquon Barkley range.
Again, to be clear on that, it's somewhere between Christian and Jonathan, not necessarily at the upper echelon of that in 19. I don't think that's, to me, at this point in Derrick's career. And then adding on to what you're saying about the front office perspective, yes, of course, they're going to be very careful with how they go about this, because at any given point, even though he has defied odds and he is defying history, at any given point, that cliff could start to flirt. That cliff could start to come out of nowhere. So they got to be careful of that. They obviously have to. What's the mitigating? What is it? Not mitigating risk, but what's the proper word for when you're trying to get out ahead of risk, projecting risk, or
like hedge your bets.
There's a term that is slipping my mind right now. But anyway, clearly he's deserving of an extension. Clearly he was the best bargain in all of football last year. So we'll see what that number ends up becoming.